welcome everyone to First Friday Forum. This is the May First Friday Forum. It is my pleasure today to be here with Tenfold, formerly LHOP and Tabor. So Mike McKenna and Shelby Nauman are joining us today. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having us. I'm really honored for this opportunity.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure. So before we start, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Rogers and Associates. They've been a longtime sponsor of these First Friday Forums, and we really appreciate their support. Also, Millersville University, we would be at the Ware Center if it were not for COVID. And so we've appreciated our relationship with them throughout the years. So big thanks to Millersville University as well. A little bit about today's forum. Mike and Shelby have created a presentation for us, and so that we can get through all of the wonderful, exciting information that they have for us. If you could submit your questions in the question and answer function at the bottom of your screen, you can choose it. You can thumbs up vote on a question if you like it, and the ones that receive the most votes are the ones that we'll get to first. So feel free to use that function as much as you like. So without further ado, I will turn it over to our guests.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. Hopefully everybody can see the screen here. Shelby and I are just thrilled to be with you this afternoon and tell you about this journey that we've been on this past, it's really been about 18 months of taking two strong organizations, Tabor Community Services and Lancaster Housing Opportunities Partnership, and bringing into fruition this new entity called Tenfold that really celebrates the strength and the history of both organizations. So a few things we want to cover with you during our time. A quick overview of some of the key housing challenges facing our community that really was a driving factor for why we decided to merge. Talk a little bit about the merger process itself. Of course, the impact of our combined organization is really interesting, but I think this is also an interesting model for the nonprofit sector to consider, to join together from a position of strength and to see maybe this is something that would benefit our sector in general. We want to tell you a little bit more about Tenfold, the why behind that new brand, and give some examples of how we're trying to multiply our impact through our work together. And of course, clients are at the center of everything we do. So we want to share a client story that really gives you an example of the strengths of the different services that are brought together under Tenfold. And we'll certainly leave time for questions and answers. We're really looking forward to that part of our conversation as well. So the Tenfold frame for when we look at our work is really that household or housing is really at the center of a thriving community. We see that it intersects and affects every aspect of our economy, of our quality of life here in Lancaster County and beyond. We see housing as a workforce issue. Certainly, we know that we have some demands for workers around the county. And yet, unfortunately, there isn't great alignment for where housing stock is that's affordable, that would really be a benefit both to those workers and to their employers. From the healthcare standpoint, we see that housing has a direct impact on both mental health and physical health. To take just one example, we know that exposure to lead during childhood can have lifelong neurological implications for those children. And in a community as old as ours, we have really old housing stock, and that's a direct consequence. We also see throughout COVID, in addition to all the stressors that brought, the threat of eviction, the threat of foreclosure, creating genuine mental health crises for households trying to figure out how they were going to keep a roof over their heads. We also see it as a racial justice and a racial equity issue. We know that historically, the official policy of the US government was underinvestment in majority neighborhoods where the majority of the residents were Black and brown. That was the official position of the Homeowners Loan Corporation from the 30s through the 50s. And there's been ripple effects in the private sector even after some of the laws changed in the 1960s. And we see that housing is a great tool for closing that wealth gap, especially through homeownership. And so we believe that if we can put housing at the center of that conversation, make sure that we're expanding housing opportunity for everyone, all ages, races, ethnicities, income levels, it's going to make a transformative effect in all these different communities. I did have a chance, thanks to the Lancaster Chamber, to share more of my thoughts on those key intersections in the Thriving magazine and their Words That Activate Change series. There's 13 really excellent pieces in that series from a range of leaders across the community in all different sectors. Would encourage you to take a look at that if you want to learn more about those different connections. A little bit on the context at which we decided to merge. What was the data that we were looking at that really prompted us to ask, could we do more to address these challenges together? We have been engaged in the Homeless Coalition for years. Tabor was one of the largest service providers in that coalition. And we were seeing the point in time count showing that there was an increase in the number of households who were living on the street on any given night after many years of decline. And that was a cause for concern. We know from data that the National Low Income Housing Coalition puts out every year, we have a significant gap between the wages that it costs to rent a 1-bedroom, let alone a 2-bedroom unit, and what the average renter wage is in our community. So it's about almost $3 of a gap you see in the bottom left here of the screen. The opposite corner of the screen, the ALICE study, that's asset limited and income constrained, is an initiative of the United Way of Pennsylvania. They're looking at the households who don't meet the federal poverty guidelines. They're above those poverty guidelines, but they're still really struggling. They're one crisis away from falling into poverty. And we see that about almost a third of our community's residents are in that ALICE threshold. And when you add that to the federal poverty line, it's over a third. So there's a lot of income vulnerability. That's reinforced by a national study that showed that most Americans wouldn't cover a $1,000 emergency with savings. They would need to rely on other options like credit or payday lenders and going into debt to navigate those challenges. So really low levels of financial resiliency. And then COVID hits, and what do we see? That was the baseline. Low levels of resiliency, low levels of savings, high levels of housing insecurity, and then the threat of eviction or foreclosure. The Census Bureau starts doing a regular survey throughout this period, and we're seeing very high numbers of people who say that there's a high likelihood within the next month they would be at risk of eviction or foreclosure. So with all of those challenges on the horizon, we felt that we would be in a position where bringing our strengths together might position us much better to tackle those major threats and make an impact on changing some positive outcomes related to those challenges.
Great.
Shelby?
As Mike said, we kind of want to share a little bit about our merger process with you, including the timeline, just to give you a little behind the scenes for how that worked for two robust organizations coming together. So summer of 2019, both Tabor and LHOP were undergoing strategic planning, talking to a lot of the same funders and partners. Fall of 2019, we made the decision, along with our boards, made the decision to start to explore partnership opportunities. In November 2019, we formed a working group that was comprised of representatives from both organizations to explore the big questions and deal breakers, such as, financial liabilities and culture, for instance. In January 2020, both boards attended a meeting facilitated by a consultant to present findings of our initial due diligence phase and the working group findings. In February of 2020, February 28th, both boards voted unanimously to pursue a legal process to reorganize. And what that means is we actually are continuing with both of our 501c3 designations. One of them is all the non-lending work of Tenfold, and the other one represents our CDFI. So that's Tenfold Community Lending. So it is from a legal perspective, a reorganization. We intend it as a merger. March Sorry, Mike, it sounded like I was stopping. In March 17th, I think, was the governor's order to really putting us all into a remote environment. So from March to October, our main office moved to Tabor. LHOP's main office closed and moved in with Tabor. And at that time, we were working together to figure out how we could best serve clients during the pandemic. November 2020, legal approval was finalized, and both 501c3 organizations are continuing. And I talked about that with Tenfold and Tenfold Community Lending. In January 2021, all staff were brought under the Tabor umbrella for pay and benefits. We launched an internal communication strategy, and we also started the rebranding process that led us to Tenfold. Next slide. So I wanted to just give you, again, some of the behind the scenes. What are the necessary ingredients for doing this successfully? I'll start with fiscal strength. We really needed to think about what were the funding considerations. Were there any potential changes that could put either organization at risk? Those types of questions. And we spent a lot of time on that in the due diligence phase. Second was focus on the client. We both shared this. So this client-centered culture was something that we both felt very strongly about and is something that we've made a priority moving forward. Board leadership, really want to recognize and thank our leaders. This was a very heavy lift, and we could not have done it without their leadership. Senior leadership, so getting buy-in, calming fears. Sometimes the thought of a merger it makes people think that their roles are going to change, things like that. We really took a lot of time to get our senior leadership teams on board with that. And then the transparency and due diligence. We had to be willing to be transparent about strengths and weaknesses and what the potential risks were in order to answer those big questions and the deal breakers. Next slide.
And one more point on that, I think the merger process itself needs to be adequately resourced, and our board recognized that. We also were very fortunate to receive a grant from the Lancaster County Community Foundation from their partnership fund that really helped cover many of the legal costs and accounting costs associated with the process. So that was a major help as well.
Mike, do you want to allow me to share screen so I can play the video, please? Thank you. And this is the introductory video. You all might have seen it in terms of when you received your invitation to attend today, but just wanted to share it with you.
Shelby, I think you need to allow share audio when you click to share the screen. It's up top. You go to view option.
I am not seeing that, sorry. Okay, well, hopefully you guys saw that with the invitation. But basically it was our public facing announcement to all of our partners, clients, and funders that we were now Tenfold. We also had a social media strategy and really have been putting a lot of focus on making sure people understand what the merger means. Sorry about that. All right, next slide. And so a lot of times we're asked why Tenfold and why unlocking opportunity. So just wanted to give you a little bit of background on that. We were both strong, robust nonprofits. We merged by choice. And Tabor had a 50-year history, LHOP had a 25-year history. So it became clear during our planning process that in order to really truly move forward as one team, instead of taking the safe route and trying to put together a combination of LHOP and Tabor into one name, that we wanted to do something totally different. And that's where we came up with Tenfold. We felt that it also reflected the best collective qualities of our roots. and capturing, energy about our new direction. So the meaning behind Tenfold evokes a sense of multiplication and fruitfulness. It also focuses on maximizing our resources for clients as an organization and through a network of partnerships. And it also goes along with Tabor's faith-founded legacy. Unlocking opportunities. To us, this is a supportive nature comes with helping our clients. Also, while our team identifies with serving, it's from a focus of empowerment. We listen and meet our clients where they are. And this could look different from one client to another, but we feel that each individual, each family has the power within them to unlock opportunity for a brighter future. Next slide.
So the Tenfold brand includes an updated mission and vision statement that we think really reflects what the combined organization offers to the community that we serve. So we felt it was really about empowerment, and we say that it's about sparking the power in all people and really kind of underline that all people to achieve equitable housing and financial security. And when we say that, we don't just mean the folks who come to our organization to get help with credit counseling or get some landlord-tenant education or to become a first-time homebuyer. Of course, we do mean those folks, but we also mean mobilizing the community in general. It's the conversations that happen at the Coalition for Sustainable Housing table. It's the way that the neighbors are coming together in SOWE. And it's also the power of anybody who cares about housing and is learning about the issue or showing up at a community hearing about a new development, or who are volunteering and serving people experiencing homelessness. As you saw, we have a pretty major crisis. The only way out of that crisis is through that collective work. The vision for our organization, how do we intend to achieve that why, that everyone working towards that goal, is about being a trusted partner and really having 4 tools in our toolbox. It's proactive education, coaching, lending, and advocacy. So we are trying to work with folks one-on-one from the standpoint of providing guidance, cheerleading when people need it. Education is happening through a robust series of workshops. Lending is through the Tenfold Community Lending Arm, both for first-time homebuyers as well to create housing, and then advocacy. That's happening, certainly advocating for the clients we're serving, but also advocating for policy changes at the local, state, or federal level, because we see how all of those things are interrelated. But this really isn't a big change for us. This is a continuation of our founding. Our why has been pretty consistent since the 1960s. The woman here is Grace Wenger. Maybe some of you would have known Grace. She wrote a piece in 1967 called No Room in Lancaster, and she was reacting to the fact that families who were Black, who were trying to find housing, were getting turned down for housing time and again by her fellow white Christians. And she was saying there's a disconnect here. We're called to be peacemakers, and yet racism and discrimination and poverty are getting in the way of achieving that purpose here on earth. And so she created and galvanized a group of fellow Mennonite leaders to create what became Tabor, and to start buying properties, renovating those properties, and making them available for renters. And from the beginning, finding the opportunities to work with government, getting HUD certified in 1971, serving anyone who needed the help, and pursuing the resources that would let us achieve that vision, and as a way of living out that value and that commitment of social justice. We are thrilled that part of the Tenfold is the Housing Equity and Equality Institute. That's a part of the organization that really focuses on tenant and landlord education and fair housing. The Fair Housing Act passed way back in 1968, but it's still a little understood law. And so having a local resource where somebody can pick up the phone, they're having a hard time, whether it's a tenant or a landlord, trying to figure out their rights and responsibilities under the law, trying to figure out this idea of like, okay, well, what does equity look like in the context of a lease or context of a conflict that might arise in a rental situation. And as part of our education to the community, we're going to be having a speaker series this month and next month, bringing some national leaders in this conversation to a virtual presentation here in Lancaster. And the first one is Dr. Tiffany Manuel. She'll be with us May 25th from 6 to 7 through Zoom. And we would love to have our guest on today's call join us for that. And she's really talking about what does inclusive housing solutions look like in the 21st century and 2021, and what can we do in our community to make more affordable housing for all kinds of people a reality. So she's a really engaging speaker, and we would love to have people join, and the registration link's at the bottom. So hopefully we can share that in the chat later so people can find it. When we think about Tenfold, there's a lot of outcomes that we are excited about. And I want to give you some concrete examples of what those look like. So we've mentioned a couple of times, it's about increasing the housing supply as well. So there's a local housing investment fund and trust is a lending product within Tenfold Community Lending that is about working with for-profit or not-for-profit developers, large developers or small developers. Maybe they're just working on a few units, or maybe it's a 60-unit development that includes affordable housing, and helping to finance that at very low interest rates so that they're able to get those projects off the ground. There's a big financing gap when it comes to the development of affordable housing, especially compared to market rate. And so this service that we have as a community lender can really be a game changer for developers who are trying to make sure that affordable housing is factored into their development plans. We also are, on the demand side, are really looking at what's that journey look like for the renter or the home buyer. So that, as many people are familiar, we have a home buyer program. For years, that was a partnership between the group workshops that LHOP was offering, the one-on-one counseling that Tabor was offering, and then the closing cost down payment assistance that LHOP's lending arm was making possible. All of those things continue, except now the coordination is really streamlined. And we're even looking through all of the programs under Tenfold and thinking about how do we build out the pipeline of people who aspire to home ownership and work with them every step of the way. Even folks who maybe at this moment in time are struggling with homelessness, we've seen that continuum work in the past and really helping people move along. Of course, it's also about folks who are in rental housing. Do they feel like they have the skills to have tough conversations when they need to with their landlord, be proactive in communication? Do they feel empowered to manage a budget and work on building up their credit? Those are tools that we offer under Tenfold too. We're no strangers to crisis. We have a group of our team members who have conversations with folks who are literally living on the street. Our outreach team has grown significantly during COVID, and they've been out there pretty much every day connecting with folks, making sure that they had basic needs like toiletries or sleeping bags, but also bridging them to other services. And we also run a shelter, TLC, for families and for veterans, where people feel safe, where they feel welcome, and where they can start building the next chapter of their lives. Like, we know homelessness is just one chapter. Yes, it's a crisis, but it doesn't define who that household is and where they're going. Resiliency, credit counseling is a big piece of this, helping people manage their debt. Typically every year there's anywhere between $700,000 and $1 million repaid to creditors, thanks to the work of our credit counseling team and obviously the hard work of the clients who are working on their repayment plans. That credit is a game changer for accessing all kinds of mainstream financial services. We also do a lot around savings and understanding that any savings is really key to helping people weather storms, and a lot of education as well about, what other types of sort of predatory lending are out there and how people can avoid that and overcome that. Coalitions are key. Like we've said, we can't do this work alone. Tabor and LHOP became stronger together through Tenfold, but there's a whole lot of other wonderful organizations, government entities, for-profit entities, faith-based organizations who are committed to these same outcomes. And we're working on that through things like the Coalition for Sustainable Housing by serving as the backbone organization and the lead agency for SOE, of course, driven by the neighbors, for the neighbors, but with the support of the combined organization behind it. And as you'll see on the next slide, there's really a broader continuum, and our clients can kind of move through that continuum to achieve their dreams.
All right, as Mike said, one of the advantages is a broader continuum of housing services. So you can kind of get a sense for everything that we do, from emergency housing to providing financing to build more affordable housing. One of the great things about this merger was there were no duplication of services, but very complementary programs that build off of one another. So the programs and services that have always existed will stay in place, and the trusted staff that help with those programs stays in place. But by joining forces, we really have the ability to leverage our team's combined expertise. Our in-house jargon is cross-teaming. So how can we take everything that we're already doing, make it better, think about evolving those programs to serve clients better, and get the best possible outcomes and impact in the community. Anything you want to add, Mike? Okay, next slide. Some examples of how we're multiplying our impact. The Eviction Prevention Network is a group that we took outside the boundaries of just the LHOP and Tabor organizations, now Tenfold, and expanded to partners throughout the community. And the idea behind the Eviction Prevention Network is that we can work with partners to provide families with counseling or even some direct assistance to avoid eviction. We know the best affordable housing is the housing that folks are already in. And just to give you a sense for the work of the Eviction Prevention Network, in 2018-19, before we expanded, we served 42 households. In 19 and 20, we served 152 households. And then in 20 and 21, we were serving about 175, which doesn't include the work that we were doing as part of the rental relief program, which served 556 families and helped them avoid, everything about eviction that is so disruptful, from having to move schools to finding new rental housing to the cost for a security deposit, all of those things. If we can keep people housed where they are, especially during a pandemic, that is really best for families in our county. And then the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, which we're currently assisting with, is capitalized with $34 million to provide assistance, both to the tenants and to the landlords who are also hurting during this time of the eviction moratorium. Mobilizing the Coalition for Sustainable Housing. Some of the folks on the call are familiar with the Coalition, but the Coalition is the advocacy arm for Tenfold, and started out of the 2013 housing study that was commissioned by LHOP. Happy to answer more questions about that. And then really transitioning from response to long-term recovery during this pandemic, and working with a lot of individuals and families in the community and landlords during this time in our work with the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, but being a resource to them moving forward. Next slide. This is just a great story. Client stories is always what we like to share to really tell the story of Tenfold. So in this case, Joel wanted to provide a stable home for his family, and he had heard from a friend about LHOP, so he looked into LHOP. We ended up starting to talk to him about home ownership, referred him to Tabor at the time, and he worked with Diane in our match savings program and started saving towards the purchase of a home. So it's really a great demonstration of how now being in one place, we can really work with people and meet them where they are, offered a different menu of services that wasn't available as two organizations, and really work with them to say, what is your ultimate goal and how can we help you get there? This one has a great happy ending. In the midst of saving for their first home, they had some setbacks with some medical expenses, but Diane really helped them create a budget, stay on track with the budget, and they were able to buy their first home in Ephrata in 2020, where a lot of great things didn't happen. They had great things happen for their family. So
it was a real bright spot.
Yeah. Next slide.
So there's a big event coming up next week on May 11th. We're having a virtual celebration that's sort of the culmination of this journey we've been on, bringing these two organizations into one. And we'll have a chance to share more about kind of the vision for the future for Tenfold, and share another client story that's really paints the picture of how transformative the journey to homeownership can be for a family that was at one point struggling financially and now is in a really great place. We would love to have you join us and support us. There's also a live auction or a silent auction that's going on right now as well. And then there'll be a live program from 7 to 8 p.m. on May 11th. And the event will be live streamed through our website. So all you have to do is go to tabornet.org. No special registration required. But we are really excited to share more about what Tenfold will mean in the years ahead. And so now we have time for questions, Jonathan.
Excellent. Wonderful presentation there. It really is kind of a testament to what collective impact of two organizations can be. And it's not just your organizations, Lancaster County Community Foundation had a lot to do to help you out there. So just kudos all around. So while I'm asking some of my questions, if you want to ask in the audience, ask some questions, you may do so in the question and answer function. I will try to get to all those before our time is up today. So if you want to go to the question and answer function, feel free to submit your questions while I'm going through some of mine here. So one of the things, just kind of much more of a mundane question, is the folks that you work with, do they have to change the name of the program that they're engaging with, or the people that they've engaged with in the past, or is that all kind of streamlined and made it so that it's not much of a change for your clients?
I think it's really an enhancement for the clients. Certainly, as Shelby said, the programs that our clients are familiar with have continued. It's about the warm handoffs now between programs that are a lot, I guess, warmer than they were in the past. We're also offering some new services that were not part of either organization, but coming together helped us see where some of those gaps were, and we were able to design a program to meet those. So just as one example, for years, we would get calls from at either organization, people saying, I need help finding housing. I have a job. I'm not in a great situation right now, but I can't find any listings, or I'm not sure where to start. And if they weren't meeting the HUD definition of homelessness, we weren't really in a position to help with housing location. If it wasn't really a fair housing type situation, it wasn't really the best fit for LHOP, but we knew that need was out there. And so we were very fortunate to receive funding from both the FAIR Fund, which is administered by Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, as well as from the Steinman Foundation, to create a housing location program for folks exactly kind of in the gap, who didn't quite fit in an existing program description, but nevertheless were relatively low income, were eager to find housing that was either more sustainable or a better fit for a variety of reasons for their circumstances. And now the housing locator is able to work with them to review the budget, to make connections with landlords, to help them advocate for themselves with landlords, especially in cases where maybe there's a challenging credit history, or perhaps a prior eviction, or maybe there's a criminal background, helping build up their skills and explaining those, as well as vouching for them. And then also providing some financial assistance to help them get into that house. Because oftentimes what we see is folks are able to afford the rent, but not necessarily make the transitions between units because they don't have the security deposit, or they don't have the first and the last month's rent ready to go. There's a lot of cash upfront that's often required to get into a unit. And so we can provide some of that assistance, and then some of that ongoing support from the housing locator for a period of time. But that was one of those things where we said, we just need to do it. We need to figure it out. This gap is there. We hear the need. Let's try it. And it's a pilot right now. We see that it's going well. It's only been a few months so far, but that was one of the things that we felt was the value add of Tenfold. Is it's not just doing what we've done well. It's not just about the stronger connections between programs. It's about new programs, new solutions for existing problems that neither of us separately were probably in a position to lift off the ground, but now together we can.
Wow, that's fantastic. And you talked a little bit about this in the presentation, but how many folks do you serve in the Lancaster area? I know you talked a little bit about the eviction programs and the rental assistance, but with all of your programs combined, do you have a number in terms of how many you serve, and what's kind of the demographic breakdown of those folks?
May I take this one? Go ahead, Mike.
Go for it.
Okay. We serve about 5,000 unique clients. There are many clients, though, are working with Tenfold in a couple different programs, so there is some overlap. The demographics is really all over the board, but one thing we're doing is we're actually tracking demographics in each program to see where those gaps are. Are we in comparison to the demographics of our community in the county here in Lancaster, who are we serving, who are we missing, and then how can we partner or expand our partnerships to make sure that we're offering our services as broadly as possible.
Wow, that's a substantial amount of people. I had no idea it was that large. That's great.
We also have we also serve York County.
Okay.
So last year we served about 700 people in York. We're still trying to build our influence in the York market and get the word out to more folks in York County that we have services. And that's another real advantage to changing our name. When we were Lancaster Housing Opportunity Partnership, some folks in York, I guess, felt like we weren't there to serve them. So we're really excited about the name Tenfold opening up how we are perceived in other communities where we seek to serve.
Wow. Yeah, that's really cool. So a couple more questions from me here, and folks, you're more than welcome to submit your own questions here too. So Lancaster newspapers featured an article on the 18th of April called "Few Homes, Quick Sales, Steep Prices, Lancaster County Real Estate Market Goes Berserk." So it's the Wild West, someone said. So how are you helping those you serve navigate this kind of crazy housing market? I'm sure that's had an effect on getting folks into homes and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's definitely been a challenge. I think it's been such a competitive market that some of the individuals we serve in the homebuyer program are perhaps perceived to be less competitive. Either they're using a mortgage product like FHA that doesn't allow things like waiving inspections. And there's also multiple bid situations where the actual price of the home is significantly over asking, which can also present a challenge. But we are still working, closing cost assistance loans on behalf of buyers. If people are still finding a way. I think part of that is that the journey often starts years before through the pre-purchase counseling, participating in the homebuyer workshops, really understanding at the outset, what does this process look like? Who are my partners in this? Is it a realtor? Is it the lender? They're learning about the housing counseling piece as well. And so they are well-prepared buyers. The other piece is the closing cost assistance, I think, does make a difference. And one of the things we're looking at right now is, given some of the competition in the market, we do have some discretion to change the amount of closing cost assistance. So maybe raising that a little bit, so that it's even our buyers are even more attractive buyers. Also looking at pre-approvals for the program, so that people know that they can come to the table with that closing cost assistance at the time they start looking. So it's certainly something that we're paying close attention to. We are blessed to work with a network of lenders and realtors, and so we're in constant dialogue with those folks as well to understand what's happening in the market, and then by extension, how do we best advocate for the clients that we're serving. Shelby, anything you'd want to add?
Okay. So earlier in your presentation, you talked a little bit about housing first as a strategy for combating homelessness. Why is that strategy so important to ending this issue?
Housing first really came about from this realization that people tend to do better on all of the challenges they're facing when they don't have to worry about the roof over their head. When they can get into housing first, then the work of navigating mental health, or perhaps substance use or trauma, or the workforce challenges that they're facing, those things tend to fall into place much faster when someone's in a stable living environment. And just to give you a sense of that, during COVID, we had a pilot and a partnership with a hotel on Lincoln Highway that was initially started as providing quarantine space for individuals in the homeless services system who were suspected to have COVID, showing some symptoms, wanted to make sure they could be in a safe place if they did have it, to recover if they didn't have it, to make sure that at least we had a place for them to be while we were waiting for the results. And we were very fortunate, and thanks to the leadership of the Lancaster County, the Homelessness Coalition, in helping to orchestrate that. We had relatively few numbers of actual positive cases among the homeless population. But as part of that, we also were able to build off that partnership with the hotel for code blue days. So days where it's really cold. It's not physically safe for somebody to be outside in that cold. Moving into the hotel, some of those individuals were folks who would be considered chronically homeless, a long history of homelessness, in and out of homelessness, usually some other challenges they're facing, like mental health or substance use. Some of those folks were able to extend their stay in the hotel and started to see a lot of progress. Folks who were maybe resistant to services, who maybe had just exchanged very few words with the homeless outreach workers, now starting to talk about past trauma, now being willing to sign up for disability income, now being willing to start thinking about a permanent housing plan. And some of those folks have been able to move into permanent housing. And when we talked to the outreach worker about it, she said, if it were not for the fact that they had been in a safe, dry place, not that constant stress of, where they're going to sleep, are they physically safe, they probably wouldn't have made the progress that they're making. So it was a great reminder, even for those of us who are doing this work, who believe in the housing first model, who've seen some of the national evidence around it, like, of course that made a difference. It was a place where they could start to heal, basically. And now we're seeing the benefits of that. So I hope that gives you a sense of why housing first matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of along with that, you talked about the eviction prevention network and the excellent work that organization has done throughout the pandemic. What I was thinking about it, what are some of the incentives that landlords have to work with the program? There's obviously incentives for the folks that are renting, but landlords, what incentives do they have?
So we really view the landlords as critical partners in our work in rental housing. So for the eviction prevention network, someone could have something as small as needing a car battery to get to work. So if we can utilize our partners who have relationships with people throughout the county, and this person, it's kind of like one small thing can lead to a much larger significant incident that carries them forward through homelessness. And if we can really go upstream and work with partners and work with case managers in the county to assist families to help pay for some of those smaller things to avoid eviction. And a lot of times landlords do not want to evict. They might have a good tenant who has just fallen on hard times. So if we can help get them through, a very short period of needing some assistance so that they can stay housed, that's ideal for both. You don't have to uproot your children and move to a different school district. You're, saving money by staying, where you are, and just the long-term psychological effects of, an eviction are really significant. That's part of the ACEs work that we do, is looking at past trauma, and eviction is certainly one of those things that really can stay with a person and have long-term traumatic impacts for especially children.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I just want to say, we really value landlords and try to work with them as much as we can. And our model in the Housing Equality and Equity Institute is really a model where we try to do almost like counseling on both sides, letting both sides know what their rights are and trying to help them find some middle ground so they can continue to work together and open up the lines of communication. It's not at all trying to punish one side or another. It's trying to get them to work better together and keep folks in the housing that they already have.
Great. So last month, April, was Fair Housing Month, and you talked a little bit about fair housing in the presentation. But what is fair housing, and why is it so important? And do we have issues of fair housing here in Lancaster County?
Yeah, the working definition for us around fair housing is the right to choose and have housing choice free from unlawful discrimination. And that covers everything, from sales, buying a home, and Mike touched a little bit on that with, past practices, rentals, lending, and insurance. And so we definitely do see that occurring in Lancaster, and our Housing Equality and Equity Institute works to resolve some of those issues. And sometimes a property owner doesn't know that they're doing something wrong. There's a lot of people who have gotten into being landlords. There's no classes necessarily that you can take. They might have inherited a property. There's no requirement for a universal lease. So there's a lot of pitfalls along the way. And so they could be doing something unintentionally that is a fair housing violation. So just letting both the landlord and the tenants make them more aware of their rights is really important. Yeah, we were really happy that the city of Lancaster partnered with us and did a ton of great work around Fair Housing Month. They have a great video out right now that I'd encourage everybody to watch about how hard it is to build affordable housing. And they hosted us, actually, I think Mayor Sirachi got to say Tenfold for the first time on the day that we did our public launch. She hosted us on Live at 5, and it was just fantastic, the partnership there around Fair Housing Month.
I think it goes back to this idea that housing is at the center of a thriving community. We all do better when we have neighborhoods that are mixed income, mixed race, where their design is such that people who have disabilities are able to live full lives in those communities. So it's not about just the individuals who may fall into a legally defined protected class. It's about the benefits that accrue to the entire community, especially when we're paying attention to the needs of those unique populations. And I'm really proud that that is part of the work that we're able to do. And in addition to Dr. Manuel, there'll be two other speakers. One who's going to talk a little bit about the history of some fair housing violations, that it's important context for us to understand if we want to move forward and build a system that is more equitable. And then also a disability rights leader who's going to talk about what does universal design look like in housing. So would love people who are curious to learn more to watch and participate in the whole series.
Great. So kind of going off script, I provided some of these questions to you beforehand, but I'd like to ask one about affordable housing and what you see. I mean, obviously, affordable housing is a factor of both housing cost and incomes of what people are able to afford. So what do you see as the largest impediment to affordable housing in this community? Is it zoning laws? Is it cost of construction? Is it folks' income? I mean, I bet your answer would be all of the above. But it seems like the $10 million question that many communities face is how do you build affordable housing without a ridiculous amount of subsidies in order to make that happen? If you can answer that one, there's a prize in it.
Yeah, I guess I'll start, Shelby, and you can pitch in. I think you're right, Jonathan, that it really is. It's all of the above, and I think a really promising strategy for increasing affordable housing has to look at both the supply and the demand side of the equation, and has to look at all of the factors that contribute to it. What is the policy environment, and is that that's at the federal level with things like low-income housing tax credits and how that's administered at the state level. It's also about zoning. I mean, think about how in Lancaster County, the zoning rules in every township are different. So that's a challenge for any developer to navigate, let alone someone who needs to know all of the ins and outs of making affordable housing possible. Things like accessory dwelling units can be a big solution here, where you don't need to have a massive development of 50 plus units. You could have, as East Lampeter Township has done, accessory dwelling units by right. So anyone can have that addition to their property and rent it to someone, and that person doesn't have to be a blood relative. It can be a great win-win for someone who perhaps is a senior on a fixed income who would like to stay in their home and would also like to have that source of income, and that source of income happens to provide safe, affordable housing for someone else who wants to live in that community, going back to the housing choice piece that Shelby talked about. So it definitely is a multifaceted approach. And I think what we're doing around the lending and increasing the supply, being part of the financing solution for developers, is also a piece of it. Would you like to add more, Shelby?
Sure. I would just say through the Coalition for Affordable or Sustainable Housing, which is our advocacy arm, we're really going to be focused on education. So really getting out into the gatekeepers, the planning commissions and municipal leaders, and really talking to them about affordable housing, making sure that folks and municipalities that really want to bring more affordable housing have the tools that they need, whether it's myth busting or just understanding more about the zoning requirements, and just really providing services around what it truly means to build affordable housing in a community maybe who hasn't had affordable housing before. A lot of people, when we talk about affordable housing, picture some maybe something that's really dense and maybe comes along with other issues that are going to impact their quality of life. A lot of those things are really unfounded. And we can point to a lot of great examples throughout the county of attractive, well-maintained, affordable units that are, for working class folks. There are a lot of folks that are, starting out as, teachers, law enforcement, that can't afford, what the costs are right now for newer construction rentals. And we like Mike said, we want to provide in our communities housing choice so everyone has the opportunity to live where they choose. And we just feel like that's vital infrastructure, and it's going to, make Lancaster an even better place if we can do more of that.
There's been a bunch of excellent reporting by the Atlantic and some other folks on what it means to have housing of all price ranges on the market and adding housing to alleviate pressure from lower end of the housing market. So in Lancaster County and Lancaster City, and just outside of that region, there's going to be a ton of new units coming online in the pipeline right now. So it'll be really interesting to see how that affects the market here. Hopefully some alleviating some of that pressure on the market. So wonderful. Well, we so appreciate you taking time to be here today. Before we head out, I have a couple announcements. One is that this video will be made available on our YouTube page probably next week. We'll send it out to those of you who have registered. We certainly encourage you to share it throughout your networks as much as you'd like. So it's free. Just share it out. It's great entertainment, you know. Thanks so much for doing that ahead of time. Our next First Friday Forum will be Friday, June 4th. We will be joined by Grant Irving, the Chief Resiliency Officer and Assistant Director of Planning for the City of Pittsburgh. He's going to talk about what it means to be a resilient community and a resilient city, especially in light of COVID and everything that's happened in the past couple of years. It's going to be a really interesting conversation. So we encourage you all to attend. That's all we have today. I want to just wish Happy Mother's Day to all of you out there for this weekend. And thanks so much again for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Take care.